Hey, it's Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out the Celebrity Jobber podcast. This is a special episode for me, episode 100. I can't believe it. Seems like just yesterday I was talking to my friend Gentry, who's in charge of the podcast network, Podcast Playground, and, he was wanting me to come up with an idea and do a podcast, and kind of came up with the idea, what would happen if a certain celebrity that you know of didn't get their big break and become famous? Maybe they would just have a regular, ordinary job. Like, what were they studying in college? Or maybe they had a career before they got famous, and nobody knows they're going to be famous. So what did they think they would be doing? I was talking to a publicist about the Celebrity Jobber podcast a couple of weeks ago, and she was asking me, about it and, what it's about. And I told her, and she goes, it's kind of like a what if. And I was like, yeah, exactly. What if? And it's kind of cool to hear what some of these people's first jobs were, because we all had a first job, right? Some of the best moments over the last 100 episodes. Today, you're going to hear from some of my past guests. Ricky Medlock from Lynyrd Skynyrd, Paul Rogers from Bad Company, Dog the Bounty Hunter, Kevin Cronin from REO Speedwagon, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary from the Shark Tank, and the 6'5" black rapping cowboy, Cowboy Troy. Some big moments in their career, some big moments that made them famous. And what if things went a little different? This is going to be a good one. It's episode 100 of Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
All right, so we're going back to episode 55, released on October 13th of 23. The legendary Paul Rogers, lead singer of the bands Free and, of course, Bad Company. I talked to him about his strokes that he had. Yeah, multiple strokes. Paul was talking about his new album, but after the strokes, he had to relearn how to walk and talk and brush his teeth and, of course, sing again. It's a really great episode you should check out, but probably one of the biggest what ifs almost happened to Paul. Imagine what would have or could have been. I heard when Jim Morrison passed away, the Doors tried to contact you, but you were living off the grid somewhere, no cell phones at the time, but they wanted you to be their new lead singer. Is there any truth to that?
Well, with the Doors, actually, I didn't know this at the time, but later on, the Doors, I played a show with the Doors without Jim Morrison, right?
Yeah.
And Robbie Krieger came up to me, the guitarist, and he said, when Jim died, all the rest of the band got on an airplane. We flew to London. I said, yeah, really? He said, yeah, and we were looking for you.
Wow.
I said, what? They said, yeah, we wanted you to join the band. And that was there's a picture of me with my jaw hitting the floor. And I was amazed at that. But, But it didn't happen because I didn't know about it.
Well, yeah, back then, think about it. Now people get in touch with everybody, social media, news breaks. It happens instantly. And back then, you had to go on foot and try to find a guy. And if you were living off the grid somewhere, you weren't going to have too much luck.
Well, pretty much, yeah. I was buried in the country. You couldn't really find me at all. I was getting what was I getting together? I think Bad Company was forming at that point.
Do you ever think, like, what if? I mean, you have to, right?
Well, I do, but I nothing, who knows, right?
Right. Imagine what could have been if Paul Rogers was also the lead singer of the Doors. Kind of crazy, right? So the Doors couldn't contact Paul Rogers, So we'll never know what that band would have sounded like. And it really changed nothing for Paul Rodgers and his path. But going back to episode 35, released May 26th of 2023, I talked to Shark Tank star and billionaire investor Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, about his very first job and how it changed his life forever.
When I got my first job, and I got a job as an ice cream scooper in an ice cream store. And you know, when you go and you line up to try the different flavors, that you get a taster. It's like a little bit of ice cream on a wooden stick. But often what the kids would do is throw their gum on the floor. So on my first, and the only reason I wanted this job is the girl I was hot for in high school was working at the shoe store across the mall. So she could see me. And I figured when we got out at 6 o'clock, we could go out on a date or something. And the first day I'm there, the owner, a woman, says to me, look, you finished scooping, now scrape all the gum off the tiles, the Mexican tiles, beautiful tiles on the floor, really big ones. Get down with a scraper. And I could see the girl looking at me, waiting for me to get out, and I was going to be on my knees scraping. And I said, excuse me, to the owner. I was hired as a scooper, not a scraper. And she said, no, you're hired to work for me, and whatever I want you to do, you're going to do. And I said, I'm not. Because I was so worried about the bad branding of being on my knees, right? And so she fired me. She fired me on my very first day, and that changed my life forever. I realized there's two kinds of people in the world. There's people that own the store, and there's people that scrape the you-know-what off the floor.
Right.
And I got to be the owner. I got to be the owner. And that was the last day I ever worked for anybody in my life. I went back years later with a camera crew after, we had our first big exit in the learning company, that $4 billion you referenced. And I wanted to find her and thank her for changing my life forever. And they ripped down the mall. They tore it to pieces.
Oh, man.
I could have afforded to do that then, which is what I wanted to do. But somebody sent me one of the bricks from it as a reminder how you got started. I have it on my desk. I look at it every day. These are the moments that define entrepreneurs. They want to find their own freedom. And I tell that to everybody. It's not about the greed of money. It's about the pursuit of personal freedom. That's why you do it, so that you can decide when to scoop and when to scrape.
I'm such a big fan of the Shark Tank and Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary. And I thought that story was just so cool, how he saw his path at such a young age. He's in high school, working at his first job, and he didn't like to be told what to do because of quote unquote bad branding. He didn't want that girl in the mall to see him scraping gum off the floor. He called it bad branding. I got a kick out of that.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
Okay, going back to one of the earlier episodes of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. And this episode is kind of special to me because it ended up getting over 2 million downloads. And this was the episode that kind of put this podcast on the map, if you will. It's a great story from the lead singer of the band REO Speedwagon, Kevin Cronin. Not only does he talk about his very first job, but also the job he had right before he got the call to join the band REO Speedwagon.
First paying job I had was after my sophomore year of high school. I went down to the local mall and just went from store to store trying to get some work, and I was hired at a low-end women's shoe store. And I will tell you what, you get an education on the opposite sex real quick when you're working in a ladies' shoe store, because you have women who are sure that they wear a size 6.5 shoe, and you somehow have to, diplomatically break it to them that these 8.5s that you're bringing out are somehow, they must have been missized to fit your feet. So you learn a lot, and no matter what you do, man, you got to look at it as a learning experience and something that's going to enrich yourself in one way or another. I little known fact, but I had I had dropped out of college and was driving a yellow cab in Chicago. And on my fourth day on the job was when I got the call from this guy claiming to be the lead guitar player in REO Speedwagon and wondering if I was interested in joining the band. So I kind of got rescued from a career as a cabbie. Although I kind of enjoyed driving the cab, meeting people, driving around. I don't know why, but I do manage to pretty much enjoy whatever it is that I'm doing. And but boy, when you're playing music and it's something that you really enjoy, and then you get to walk on stage in front of thousands of people and hear them singing back the songs that you wrote along with you, that is a joyful experience, I will tell you.
Pretty cool story. Not only Kevin Cronin used to be somewhat of an Al Bundy, a ladies' shoe salesman, and I thought it was funny on how women, so he says, constantly saying they have a smaller shoe size than what it actually is, and he had to find a diplomatic way to break the news. I'm sorry, you're not a 5.5, you're actually a 9. But he was actually a cab driver when he got the call to become the lead singer of REO Speedwagon. Who knows, if he didn't get that call, might be still driving an Uber or a Lyft today.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
Now, I want to take you back to just a couple of months ago, episode 86, Dog the Bounty Hunter, released on May 10th of 2024. Man, this guy is something else. He's a new resident to the state of Florida. He listens to the radio stations that I happen to work at, and we kind of became friendly. This guy has one hell of a story, and he could have went in one of two directions, and it would have been a lot easier for Dog the Bounty Hunter to take a wrong turn. You're not going to believe what Dog the Bounty Hunter did as an occupation before he went to prison, and you're not going to believe what he almost had to do when he got out.
My daddy was a Navy man, so I had to work to pay rent once I started using electricity and eating food. Because, I was the stepchild, right?
Right.
My brother never had to do it. My half-brother. That's what I remember as, due to writing and all that, cutting yards. And then I went door to door. I became a #1 Kirby salesman when I was a kid.
A vacuum salesman?
Yeah. When I first got married, I would talk my dad tried to out of beating me. I would go door to door and ma'am, would you like your yard cut? I'll do your yard for you for $2-3. Well, yes, young man, I sure will. Let me tell you, I was making more money than any kid my age, but I worked. So all that helped me become the #1 Kirby salesman in the nation. And I still rode a Harley, put my hair back and pinned it before they even did that. And I went to farmers, mostly wives, and I would, because they trusted me, I sold a woman's product, and I went in and demonstrated it, and I barely ever missed a sale.
I bet.
I sold Kirby's because I had faith in the Kirby. Still do. I knew it was American made. I knew it could out-clean any vacuum cleaner on the market. So because of my confidence in what I was selling, I pumped it.
Door-to-door vacuum salesman. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Are you thinking in prison? Because you got a lot of time to think, You're reading the Bible, You're working out, and you're thinking. Did you ever think, though, man, what am I going to do when I get out of prison? Was there anything that you thought you would be doing instead of a bounty hunter? Was there something that you were passionate about?
Well, I never thought bounty hunting, okay? What I thought about was at Kirby, of course, because I was successful. But if you had a felony, you couldn't go door to door, especially murder. So that was out.
Right.
So the other one was in the Devil's Disciples back then. They called them the Dirty Dozen, and there was allegedly 12 that had been convicted of first-degree murder, and they were a lot more respected and feared than any 1%er in the club. So my options were the Dirty Dozen, and there was no other option.
That was a life of crime.
So it was a life of crime. Of course, I learned so much in prison on how to pick locks, how to cover up this and that.
Right.
I was taught by the best. I've always been mentored by the best, whether it be the Lord, a marriage, criminal activities. I had one of the most genius IQs so high that was in prison. So I thought, well, I'm going to just, I got to be a Dirty Dozen. I got to come out and be that. And,
right.
Ask God before I take my last breath to forgive me.
Such an incredible story, Dog the Bounty Hunter. I urge you to go back to episode 86 and check out the full episode. By the way, you can go to celebrityjobber.com and see all past episodes right there. This is the 100th episode of the Celebrity Jobber podcast, and kind of playing some really key moments in some of these celebrities' lives, which made them go in the direction that they're famous for. Maybe a big break, a first job, pretty much finding out who these people were before they were famous. And a couple what-if moments. One that you had earlier when I talked to Paul Rogers and how the band The Doors wanted him to be the lead singer of their band, but they couldn't find him. Another what-if moment from Lynyrd Skynyrd guitarist Ricky Medlock, episode 72, released February 9th of 2024. What if? Ricky talks about how he was one of the early drummers of the band Lynyrd Skynyrd, which has drawn a lot of controversy online. And he also talked about the infamous plane crash that killed lead singer Ronnie Van Zant and guitarist Steve Gaines and his sister Cassie Gaines. How things might have been different for Ricky Medlock as he talks about almost getting on that plane.
I had taken my old man over to see Ronnie and the guys because Ronnie really loved my old man. He had taken my old man as an inspiration to write, one of the inspirations to write Curtis Lowe about.
Right, okay, great.
And he had dedicated the album Nothing Fancy and a song on there called Made in the Shade because he used to tell us, you boys keep going the way you're going, and one of these days you'll have it made in the shade.
Right.
So Ronnie wrote a song to that. Well, we went over to their studio at the time in Riverside, and they were there. And Ronnie saw my dad and gave him a big hug, man, and said, Shorty, it's so good to see you. Y'all come on in and we'll play you some of the new record. Well, we go in, and he happened to play That Smell. And so after we heard it, and we talked a little bit longer. Before we left, Ronnie said, Ricky, we got our own plane. Why don't you come ride for a week with us?
Oh, my God.
Just come and hang out, maybe get up and jam, whatever.
Oh, my God.
And I thought it was a good idea. So right 2 days, maybe a day and a half, 2 days before, Blackfoot gets bookings. And so we had to do shows, and I called Ronnie up and told him that I couldn't go, had to do shows. Well, as they were leaving that afternoon from Greenville, we were pulling into Columbia, South Carolina. And that's how close fate was.
Oh, my God.
Then I heard about it. And, of course, my parents were just, shocked. My mom was, really shocked and kind of devastated because she loved all those guys. And the next thing was that after, I went through this thing where I says, man, if I'd have been there, maybe I could have said something or done something. But the next thing you know, I joined Skynyrd again, and we're on our first run in Europe in '96. We had just played London, and we had just did the tour over there, and it was on the anniversary.
Oh, God.
In '96. It was on the anniversary of that happening. And I climbed up on the bus upstairs, the double-decker bus, on the front lounge, and I'm sitting with Gary and Dale, and Gary looked over at me and said, where were you? And I was like, where was I what? He goes, where were you on this day back then? I said, oh, okay. I said, I was in Columbia, South Carolina as you guys were leaving to go to Greenville. And I said, Gary, I always thought maybe if I'd have been there, maybe I could have said something to change the course, And he goes, Ricky, there was really nothing you could have done or said. And he said, besides, it's meant for you to be here now. It wasn't meant for you to be there then.
Wow.
So There you go.
Absolutely gave me chills. What if Ricky Medlock was on that plane? Obviously, we wouldn't be talking to him, and he would have been maybe one of the band members of Lynyrd Skynyrd who perished. But just an unbelievable story and a crazy thought. What if he happened to go on that plane? That was a great episode.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
Finally, if you are a fan of country music, you might know the 6'5" black rapping cowboy by the name of Cowboy Troy, who was discovered by country superstars Big and Rich. And a friend of mine just so happened to be listening to this past episode a few weeks ago, which, by the way, was episode 17, released on January 20th, 2023. And he was telling me, wow, what an amazing phone call that Troy got that absolutely changed his life forever.
After about a year of driving and flying back and forth between Dallas and Nashville, it fizzled out. It didn't work out too well. So I got back to Dallas and decided I'm going to get me a job. And then my other job had been filled, so I wound up getting a job selling Western wear at Cavender's Boot City.
Okay.
and did that for a while because I knew the material, I knew the stuff because I was always shopping, buying clothes there. And so I ended up getting a job there. And then in 2003, I started working in Foot Locker, and I got a job at Foot Locker. I still have my Foot Locker jersey with the name tag on.
Do you really? Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's great.
I still have it. And in the meantime, John and Kenny had gotten a record deal. Big and Rich got a record deal, and they had invited me to make an appearance on that first album that they were going to be on Warner Bros.
Wow.
And because they knew what I was doing, and I had been going back and forth and doing appearances in Nashville too, so people were starting to know a little bit about who I was through Big and Rich. And then one day, spring of 2004, I get this phone call, and you're not allowed to have your cell phone with you on the sales floor, so it was in the back.
Right.
Actually, I had it in the back, and then I see that there's a voicemail, and it's just about my lunch break. So I go and sit out in my car, and at this point, it was one of those things where I was like barely making ends meet. My vehicle had been repossessed, and I was literally driving a small 1998 Kia Sophia.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it was a tote-the-note used car lot.
Right.
Oh, and I'm sitting in my car, and you still had to crank the windows with the handle.
Right.
And I'm like sitting there, and I'm listening to this voicemail, and it's from John Rich, and he's telling me, "Hey man, we got offered to go on tour with Tim McGraw."
Wow.
And I was like, "Man, that's so cool." So I called him back, and he's sitting in the car because they're doing radio interviews, and he's sitting in the car on the way to another interview with Big Kenny. And I'm just like so excited for the both of them. I was like, man, that's awesome. Congratulations, man. Because I'm thinking when they come through Dallas, I'm going to get to go see my buddies sing with Tim McGraw.
Yeah, you're going to get backstage. You're going to meet Tim McGraw.
And then all of a sudden, I was like, congratulations, guys. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait till you guys get to Dallas and come see the show. And they're like, no, dude, we want you to go with us.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, what? And so at that moment, I didn't really know, should I start bawling or should I start yelling? Because it was like, really? You really want to take me on tour? And they were serious. And, I had just gotten married at the time, so I'm like, let me ask my wife. But yeah, that sounds cool. And I literally had just gotten married, so, not long before then. I asked the wife, and she was kind of like, what? Really? Are you serious?
Right.
I'm like, yeah, this will get us out of debt and all that, because we were trying to get by. And so went on tour, and summer tour turned into the fall tour. And the fall tour turned into a record deal for me.
Wow.
So, and my first record came out in 2005. So it was my first major record on Warner came out in 2005. So it just turned into that. But I kept my Foot Locker jersey with me for the first year. I'd keep it in the closet on the tour bus to remind me of where I came from, because
yes,
it would serve as a reminder. Like, if you mess up, you got to go back to the mall and sell shoes again.
What an unbelievable story. The phone call that changed his life in his Kia on his lunch break from Foot Locker, and keeping that Foot Locker jersey on the tour bus with him to remind him if he screws up, he's going right back to selling sports shoes, to selling sneakers. Man, unbelievable. It's why I love doing this podcast. Moments that changed these people's lives and what they did before they were famous. Everybody's got a story, and I love hearing about them. And I guess you do too, because you've listened for 100 episodes. If you weren't listening, I wouldn't have done 100 episodes, that's for sure. So I thank you so much. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast, streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe. I would love a 5-star rating and leave a review. You can listen to every episode on celebrityjobber.com. Follow on Instagram, celebrityjobber_podcast, and youtube.com/the @celebrityjobber. Here's to 100 episodes. Thank you so much for listening to the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. Until next week, I'm Jeff Zito.